Welcome back to No BS Python. So far, we've learned how to write simple programs with variables, input and output, conditionals, and loops. Now it's time to learn how to organize your code better using functions. A function is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. You define it once in your program and then call it whenever you need it. To create a function, use the keyword def, this def, followed by the name of the function, which can be anything, but it's probably best to name it something related to what it's actually doing. So for example, I want to create a greet function that will greet someone whenever I call it. I would name it greet. Then you can follow it by open and closed parentheses and a colon. Now inside this function is you can just write any block of code or any lines of code that you want, and whenever you call this function, these lines will be run. So for example, we can have a print statement that says hello there, and that's our greet function. Now instead of having to rewrite this over and over in future parts of our code, if we want to call this same line of code over and over, instead we can just call the function by using the function name followed by the open and close parentheses, and it works. Hello there. There's no need to repeat each print statement, which increases the reusability and cleanliness of your code and also just makes it a lot easier for you in general. And while this doesn't seem like it saves much time and space now, as we only have one line in here, further down the line, you'll probably end up coding functions that will have tens of lines of code, even up to 100 lines of code inside of them. And it's just going to save you so much more time and energy when coding programs. Functions become even more powerful when they can accept inputs known as parameters. For example, you could define a greet function, let's just build on this, that takes a name as a parameter. And this makes this function more customizable. So for example, and it makes it more personalized. So we can create this name parameter by going inside the open and closed brackets and just typing name. And this is a parameter. Now, whenever we call the function, we can pass something inside these brackets. Sorry, not def. We call it. And for example, let's just say Bob. That's a name, right? Now, instead of it being hello there, we can say hello and then name. And then when we call our function, now it says hello Bob. And we can change it to say Alice, and it says hello Alice as well. Sorry, there's not supposed to be a space there. So this makes your code and functions more flexible and reusable for different situations. You can also have as many parameters as you want. So you can have name1 and a name2 parameter, and then you can say print hello name, and then have another print statement saying hello the second name, name2. And when let's just call it with the two names that we had before. And then now it says hello Alice and hello Bob. So these parameters are just super useful, essentially, for making your code more usable in different situations and just makes the function more personalized for different uses. Remember, you can have as many different parameters as you need for the functions, function. Functions can also return values. That means instead of just printing something, which I've done here, they can send data back to where they were called. So let's say we want to create, instead of a greet function, we can create an add function that takes in two numbers. As I said, you can have multiple parameters, number 1 and number 2, followed by a colon, and then now we write inside the function to define its behavior. So we can actually use the keyword return, and then we can type num1 and then use our arithmetic operator, which we learned in our last video, the addition operator with the plus sign, and num2. And so basically how this works is that you pass two numbers as parameters into our add function and then do the math inside the function and return the result, the whole thing. And you can end up storing this result inside a variable and using it however we want. So for example, we can have a total sum variable equal to our add function 1 and 2, and then we can print our total sum. And it prints 3. Now let's talk about scope. Scope is about where variables exist and where you can access them. So for example, you can see how there's a num1 and num2 as parameters, but inside here they can also act as variables. As you can see, we're not literally typing the value of num1, we're calling it by a variable name, or the parameter name actually. However, variables defined inside these functions are only local variables, meaning they only exist within this function. So for example, if I try and access num1 out here, let's just say I would say total sum is equal to add 1 and 2. So the value of num1, we passed it as 1 inside our function. But if we were to try and print num1, we would get an error because the variable is not defined. So basically, what you need to get from this is that any variables that are parameters inside a function only exist within that function and cannot be used or accessed outside that function. On the flip side, variables defined outside of all functions are global variables, which means they can be accessed both inside functions and outside functions. It's best to keep things tidy and avoid using too many global variables, however. In essence, functions keep your code clean, reduce repetition, and make it easier to build bigger programs. They're one of the most important tools in Python and in programming in general. And now you know how to use it. That's it. No BS, just Python.